Getting back to the study on deception, we're still looking at the methods of deception, and they are legion. We're down here on page 19 of the outline, if you have that. And we're going to look at what I had intended to finish up last Sunday and did not get to, and that is talking about how deception is accomplished by making things appear differently than they actually are. And this is kind of the very nature of deception. Because if somebody didn't make things look differently than they were, then you probably wouldn't fall for it. Most people won't just choose evil when it's given to them as an option. You have to couch the evil in good, in terminology or dressing it up to look different than it is. And this is one way that evil people deceive. I'm going to get into a particular instance of this now, and the Scripture has quite a little bit to say about this. And that is using deceitful weights and balances. And the Bible talks about this, that back in the old days, this is how commerce was done. It was done with weights and measures. And we don't use weights and measures today because a $1 bill weighs the same amount as a $100 bill. And that's a problem, and we'll talk about that in a second. But there's no reason to go to the grocery store and for them to get out a balance and start putting your dollar bills on there or whatever. We don't do that. But in the biblical days, when they had real money, they did. If you look in Micah chapter 6, verses 11 and 12, the Lord here condemns the people in Israel's day for their, what he calls, deceitful weights and balances. I don't know if he actually calls them. I don't think he calls them deceitful weights and balances, but that's what I refer to them as. But we'll see here. He even has, he actually does. Yeah, he does. Anyway, Micah 6 and verse 11, the Lord says, "Shall I count them pure with the wicked balances and with the bag of deceitful weights?" Now, if you think about it, balances themselves can't be wicked. You have to be a moral being, a rational being to be wicked, right? You can't, a piece of steel can't be wicked in and of itself, right? And weights can't be deceitful. The weights themselves aren't deceiving anybody. So why is he referring to the balance being wicked and the bag of weights being deceitful? It's the people that are using those things and how they're using them. That's why the Lord is imputing the guilt to the inanimate object here. "For the rich men thereof are full of violence, and the inhabitants thereof have spoken lies, and their tongue is deceitful in their mouth." You see, so you have deceitful people using these weights and balances in a deceitful way, and that's why the Lord is condemning the weights and the balances themselves. Now, the Bible refers to this practice as using divers weights and measures. Divers. Divers means, let me get you, I actually don't have the definition, and just so I get the definition right, while you turn to Deuteronomy 25, I am going to turn to Hebrews chapter 1 because I know I have divers written there in the definition. Divers is different or not alike in character or quality, not of the same kind. So the Lord doesn't like it when you use different weights and balances, not of the same kind. When you use weights and balances to measure out money, the weights all have to be exactly the same. They have to be the same kind. You don't have one kind of weights for one person and another kind of weights for another, or one kind of weights for a buyer and another kind for a seller, or whatever. And I'll get into what I'm talking about here in just a second. Deuteronomy 25, 13 through 16. Deuteronomy 25, 13 through 16. This is how deception was done in those days. One of the ways. Deuteronomy 25 and verse 13. "Thou shalt not have in thy bag divers weights, a great and a small. Thou shalt not have in thy house divers measures, a great and a small. But thou shalt have a perfect and just weight, a perfect and just measure shalt thou have, that thy days may be lengthened in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. For all that do such things, and all that do unrighteously, are an abomination unto the Lord thy God. So God hates this kind of thing. You're not supposed to have several different weights, right? So when somebody comes here to buy something from you and you say, oh, I'm going to pull out these weights that weigh less or that weigh more, and then I'm going to put them on the balance and I'm going to trick the guy into paying me more. That's what was going on there. God says you don't have that. You have a perfect weight, and all of your weights are uniform. They're all the same. See, what would happen would be a deceptive merchant would have a false set of weights when weighing the money to make the buyer give him more money than was owed, and a false set of measures measuring containers when measuring out the wheat, so the buyer got less than he was supposed to. Turn to Amos, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Amos, or Amos, however you pronounce that, Amos 8, 5 through 6. Saying, when will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn, and the Sabbath, that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small, and the shekel great, and falsifying the balances by deceit, that we may buy the poor for silver, and the needy for a pair of shoes, yea, and sell the refuse of the wheat. You see what they're doing here? So they have diverse weights and measures. They make the ephah small, and the shekel great. Now a shekel is a measurement of weight. It's a measurement of silver in particular. And they make that great. So imagine, you know what a balance is, right? You got a balance that has two little round flat things on both sides, and you put certain things on each side, and when they balance out, right, it's level, right? That's how you measure something against something else. So you should have a standard weight, which is a gram or a kilogram or a pound or an ounce or whatever, and that standard weight should be uniform across all of society. And when you come and a merchant is going to sell you something, and he says, okay, I want 2 shekels of silver for this, what the merchant would do is he'd pull out a 2 shekel weight or 2 1 shekel weights, and he'd put those on one side of the balance, and then he would make the buyer, he'd take his silver and he'd put it on the other side until it evened out. And then he knows that he's getting 2 shekels worth of silver from the buyer because he's got a perfect weight to measure it against. But what these jerks would do is that they would have a weight that said shekel on it, but it really wasn't a shekel. It was heavier than a shekel, right? So instead of wanting, say, 2 ounces of silver, he'd have maybe his shekel. I'm just going to say a shekel's worth an ounce. It's not, but just for way of analogy so you understand. So let's say he wants 2 ounces of silver for the wheat that he's selling. And instead of taking out 2 things that actually weigh an ounce, his shekel actually weighs 1.5 ounces or 2 ounces. So he puts his heavy shekel on the weight, on the one side of the balance, He puts his heavy shekel on the one side of the balance. And then the poor guy that is paying for the wheat, he puts in 2 shekels, what he thinks is 2 shekels, and the balance is still down on the other side. That's weird. Keeps putting more on until all of a sudden it balances out. He's like, well, that's weird. I mean, I didn't think that. I thought that that 2 shekels of silver wasn't that much, but that's his weight says 2 shekels, so that must be what it is. You see, he's making the shekel great to get more money out of people. He's robbing them, cheating them, right? And then he says, making the ephah small. An ephah is a Hebrew dry measure identical in capacity with the bath. It is variously said to have contained 4.5 to 9 gallons. So there was obviously some variation there, but I'm assuming they must have had an ephah that was a certain amount, a certain number of gallons in that day. But he'd make the ephah small. So he's got an ephah there. He's got a tub or a bucket, we'll say, that he's supposed to measure out the wheat. So he puts, first of all, his fake shekels on the scale, and then he weighs out more shekels than he's really owed. So he's making the guy pay more shekels for what he's given him. And then he gets out his bucket, which says ephah on the side of it. Except guess what? This bucket's not really an ephah. It's 3/4 of an ephah, or it's half an ephah, or it's 9/10 of an ephah, or whatever. And he gets out this bucket that says ephah, but it's not really ephah, and he fills it up with wheat. And here you go. Made the ephah small. He gives him less wheat for more money. He's cheating him. You see how that works? That's what they did. That's what is referred to. That's what the Bible's talking about when it says divers weights and measures. But whenever the tax man comes there and he doesn't want to get in trouble, he gets the real shekel out. When it's, or maybe when it's the other way around, when the tax man comes, he's like, oh, you want 2 shekels? He pulls out his other shekels, right? His shekels that don't weigh 4 shekels, but that weigh a half a shekel, and he puts them on the weight, and then he weighs out the silver to the tax man, and he pays him less, right? You see how that works? Right? You use heavier shekels with some people and lighter shekels with others, depending on whether you're getting money or giving money. You see how that works? That's how they did it. You might have one set of weights and measures for buying goods and another set for selling goods, right? Because you want to get a better deal. God absolutely hates this practice of cheating and fraud. Let me give you a couple of more verses. We already saw in Deuteronomy, and it's an abomination, and Proverbs says likewise, Proverbs 20, 10 through 23. Proverbs 20, 10 through 23. It says, divers weights and divers measures, both of them are a like abomination to the Lord. God hates different weights and measures for ripping people off. Verse 23, divers weights are an abomination unto the Lord, and a false balance is not good. You see, the Lord, His weights and His balances are just. A just weight. A just ephah. We'll get to that verse in just a second. Look at Proverbs 16 first of all. Proverbs 16 and verse 11. And then I'll explain to you how the same thing used to be done. Even when we had hard money, when we had real money, the same thing was done, or the same principle was done in a different way. And I'll explain that here in just a second. Proverbs 16 and verse 11. It says, a just weight and balance are the Lord's. All the weights of the bag are His work. So if you are a God-fearing man, you had just weights and balances. That's how you do honest, good, equitable business. Look at Leviticus 19, 35 through 36. In other words, you charge what is fair, you pay what is fair. Now, if you can charge more and people will pay it, that's fine, as long as they know what they're getting, right? There's nothing that says that you can't charge more or charge less, as long as you make it known exactly what they're getting for the price. Leviticus 19, 35 through 36. It says, ye shall do no unrighteousness in judgment, in meat yard, in weight, or in measure, just balances, just weights, a just ephah, and a just hin shall ye have. I am the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. So this is a big deal to God. How many verses did we just read there? Probably 4 or 5 at least, and there's probably more. But many verses where God really takes this stuff seriously. I was talking about, I'm going to get into some other examples here, but I was mentioning back when we used to have real money, I say we, like even back in the days of the Roman Empire, a long time ago, when they had gold and silver as money, what they would do, you've probably heard of this before, they would clip the coins. You ever heard of clipping coins? What they would do is they'd take the coin and they would shave off just a little bit off the edge of it. Take a little pair of scissors or something and cut the edge off the coin, and you really couldn't tell. They wouldn't cut very much off, just a little bit. But when you do that a little bit on a whole lot of coins, you can make some money doing that, right? And people don't know any different. Next time you pull out a quarter or a dime out of your pocket, take a look at it, especially a new one, but even the older ones. Look at the edge of it, and you'll notice something. They do this now for just purely superficial reasons. Nobody in their right mind would clip a quarter today. You'd be an idiot, right, to clip off the worthless pot metal or whatever it's made out of. But in the day, there was a reason for this. Take a look at the edge of your quarter, and you'll see the little cut marks in the edge of it, that grooved edge. You know what that grooved edge was originally there for? To prevent clipping. Because when you clip the coin, then the grooved edge isn't there, and then everybody knew that it was a clipped coin. Now they just do that to make the counterfeit ones look real. You see, the Fed's the one that's doing the counterfeiting now. They counterfeit the money. They pass off money that's not actually money and then say it is. But anyway, that's what people used to do, was just another form of diverse weights and measures. It's the same idea. You're giving him something you're claiming to be an ounce of silver, but it's not really an ounce of silver because you cut the edge off. And of course, this wasn't the common folk that were clipping the coins. It was the government that was clipping the coins. They were using it as a way to generate revenue, of course. I know that's shocking to you that there would be malfeasance in government, but it occasionally, once in a while, it does happen. Now, this is done by merchants nowadays in a different way. Today, it's accomplished by changing packaging sizes without making it explicit to the buyer. They do actually put the label on the tub of ice cream, right? And it does say, if you look closely, it does say 1.5 quarts when it used to say 2 quarts. It used to be a half gallon. But you notice what they've done though? The quart of ice cream used to be more square, a little bit rectangular, but closer to square, the tub. But now you notice that the quart and a halves, notice they're taller, but they're narrower. So when you look at them from the front, without actually turning it sideways, they look tall, don't they? It looks like there's still a half a gallon in there, doesn't it? When you turn it sideways, though, you can barely see. It's like, looking at a piece of paper or something sideways. There's hardly anything there. Well, that's what they're doing, right? They're making it look like you're still getting what you used to get, but you're not getting what you used to get. But you're still paying for it. It's not like they cut it down by 75% and then are charging you 75% less. No, of course not. Or it's also done by changing the quality of the inputs when you're producing something to make a lower quality product and not being forthcoming about it. Now, it's one thing if you make a lower quality product with junky Chinese inputs in it, and you say right on the front of it, this is inferior quality, this is made out of junk, and it's going to break in 2 years, and you're going to have to buy another one, right? That's a great marketing tactic, by the way, right? Of course, they don't do that. But you ever notice how things, especially you older people, you notice how things used to last a long time? In my grandmother's old house, there is still a hot water tank in that house that was there, that was put in used. It was, I think, a couple of years old at the time when it was put in, the year that my twin aunt and uncle were born, and they are 63 years old now. So there you go. There is a 65-year-old hot water tank in my grandmother's house that's still kicking. Now, granted, my dad has JB welded that thing numerous times and fixed it, kept it going, but still, you aren't going to take some piece of junk you buy at Lowe's or Home Depot today and 65 years later with a little bit of JB weld and still have that thing working. It's, 10 years maybe? It's toast. 15, I don't know, not very long. Why? Well, they make everything thinner. They make everything cheaper. But they don't tell you that, do they? Just another example, another principle of diverse weights and measures. That's also how they hide inflation, too. They hide the rising prices because when you used to buy an appliance for the house and it lasted for 25 years and you paid $100 for it, now if you paid $100, if you could even find one for $100, which you couldn't, but if you paid even $500 for it and it lasts for 5 years or maybe 10 years at the most, you realize there that they're hiding the inflation because they're making things much cheaper to try to keep the price down, but it doesn't last as long, and you have to buy 2 in the same amount of time as you used to have to buy 1. Now, governments also engage in this deceitful practice. They debase the currency by inflation, by money printing, and thereby they rob people of their purchasing power. I think I probably have talked about this a time or two, I suppose, in my ministry, but it does fit really well right here, so I suppose I should probably talk about it again just briefly. So let me just give you just a brief history lesson here. So the U.S. government decoupled the dollar from gold and silver and continued to call the currency dollars. Right? Dollar used to mean something. Today, if you ask somebody what's a dollar, they'd say, what's that green piece of paper? It's that thing with numbers written on it. It's currency that we exchange for goods and services. But if you ask them, well, what actually is a dollar? Can you define a dollar for me? Well, yeah, it's 6 inches long and it's 3 inches tall and it's got green ink on it. But no, define what a dollar is, right? And somebody really can't define what a dollar is. What is a dollar? Well, see, a dollar used to be a unit of weight of silver. It used to be a unit of weight, kind of like a pound or an ounce, right? So if you ask somebody, if you went up to somebody and said, hey, and there was no context, okay? You just walked up to some guy and you've never talked to him before and you say, hey, give me an ounce. What's he going to say? An ounce of what? Hey, give me a pound. Give me some inches. Of what? Right? You just can't throw a measurement out there. You have to say, give me a pound of cheese. Give me a pound. Give me an inch of yarn. Right? Something like that. Well, a dollar used to be a unit of weight. So when you say, give me a dollar, what you were really inferring is, give me a dollar of silver. Because it was a weight of silver. Here's a quote here from Peter Schiff in Crash Proof 2.0. He says, a dollar was first defined in the Mint Act of 1792, this is just after the Constitution was written, as 371.25 grains of fine silver. So there used to be a definition. Here's what a dollar is. 371.25 grains of fine silver. That's what a dollar was. Now in 1934, and the dollar was also defined, there was a bimetallic standard, so a dollar was also defined as about 1/20th of an ounce of gold. An ounce of gold was worth $20 and some odd cents, so roughly a dollar was 1/20th of an ounce of gold. There actually is a problem. I'm not going to get into this, but there is a problem with a bimetallic standard because whenever the supply of one of the metals increases and the ratio of the metals is no longer the same, then there becomes an arbitrage opportunity where people can buy the one and sell the other one, and it does cause trouble. And then what you end up doing is having a shortage of one or the other metals because people are gobbling up all the metal that's undervalued and then shipping it overseas for money that's undervalued, and you end up with a shortage of one or the other. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Nobody cares about that, but I just thought I would throw it in there just for the fun of it. But anyway, in 1934, the U.S. government made it illegal for U.S. citizens to own gold, and they proceeded to confiscate it. This was during the Great Depression with FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So they took all the gold. It used to be people walked around, had gold coins in their pocket, or probably more likely in the bank or at home, and they used silver in their pocket, but they used to be able to exchange gold for goods and services. It was actually used as money. And then after they confiscated the gold, they revalued the dollar from approximately $20 an ounce of gold to $35. So that was a devaluing of the money. So now all of a sudden the same ounce that used to be worth 20 is now worth 35. So it was to the government's favor, but not to the people's favor. Because the people had to spend more dollars to get the same amount of gold, right? Not a good thing. Then in 1965, the government removed the silver from the dimes and quarters and passed off the new ones to the public made of cheap metals. Some of you are probably, when were you born, Wayne? 53. You're probably, you'd be old enough, in theory, to you remember when that happened? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So back in those days, when Wayne was but a wee child, right? Long time ago. The quarters and the dimes were actually made out of silver. And if you've seen the old ones, they look different. You get an old silver, an old dime, they just look cool. They look different. They sound different. You drop them on the table and they chink together differently. I can see why. Was it, who was the guy in the cartoon where he would just, like bathe in the gold it was the guy in the Christmas story thing, the Scrooge or whatever. Wasn't he the guy? I forget. The Grinch. Was it the Grinch? I think it. Anyway, it's one of those stories where the guy used to just like to bathe in his gold and silver. But anyway, but what they did anyway is in 64 they were made out of silver. In 65, now they're made out of some cheap junk metal. but they had to find something that weighed the exact same amount, and that was the conundrum that they were having there, because you had all these machines that you'd put quarters and nickels and dimes into, and the way the machine worked, I guess, is those quarters would run down. There were slots in there, and they would, gravity, they'd run down the slots, and I don't know exactly how they worked, but they probably had to roll down and hit at just the right timing for it to be passed off as a real quarter. Because if you try to just take a piece of metal that you made into the same shape as a quarter and roll it in there, if it wasn't the exact specific gravity of a real quarter, it wouldn't work. The machines wouldn't take it. Well, they had to figure out how to get some cheap metal to be the exact same specific gravity as silver. And once they figured that out, then they were good to go, and then they could screw us all, which they did. So they started passing off these things as quarters and dimes, which it used to cost them a quarter's worth of silver to make a quarter, right? 90% of the weight of the silver quarter, that's what it cost them to make it, because it was 90% silver. Well, when you can make money a lot cheaper than that, when you can pass off something that used to cost a couple dollars to make, and now it only cost, in today's dollars or whatever, cost a couple dollars, a few dollars to make, and now you can make it for a few cents, you can make some money doing that kind of thing. There's an old saying, it's hard to make money making money. And if you're actually making real money, it's hard to make money doing that, right? But when you're making fake money, it's really easy to do it. When you can pass it off, when it costs you nothing, you can print up a $100 bill for a penny and then sell it to somebody for $100. That's a pretty good deal. I wish I could get a business like that. But anyway, so that's what they did. They took the silver out of the money. That's called deception. If you or I in 1964 would have said, I have an idea. I'm going to get myself a mint, and I'm going to print up some silver or some quarters that are made out of zinc and copper and whatever else, these cheap metals, and then coat them with something that looks shiny like silver, and I'm going to make them look just like the other ones. You know what that's called? Counterfeiting. You know what would happen to you if you did that? You'd go to jail. But when the government does it, what is it called? Nothing. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever. Isn't that funny? In 1971, the dollar was completely unpegged from gold and was no longer redeemable in gold by foreign governments. From 1934, when the government confiscated it, until 1971, the United States public could not hold gold anymore. They had to turn it in, and there were huge fines and penalties for not turning it in. But foreign central banks could still redeem their dollars for gold. Redeem their gold for dollars. Let me put it the correct way. So in other words, when we had a balance of trade with a foreign nation, let's say France, and the French sold us a bunch of wine, and we paid for that wine with a bunch of paper dollars, and France has all these paper dollars, and now France sees, you know what? The U.S. has been waging this crazy war in Vietnam. They've been printing money like crazy. The dollars are no longer worth what they used to because they printed so many of them. We don't want these dollars anymore. We want the gold. They could send back those dollars to the Federal Reserve Bank and get the gold. And they'd ship the gold out. It was, 1 or 35 to 1. They could send in $35. They could get an ounce of gold. Well, what happened was Nixon realized we're not going to have any gold left. I mean, the gold was just flying off the shelves. And he realized that if we allow this to happen, we're going to be totally emptied out of all of our gold. And he closed the window. No foreign governments could anymore redeem their dollars for gold. And at that point, the dollar was a purely fiat currency. And you older people remember the inflation of the 70s. As soon as they did that, inflation started to go through the roof. Prices started to go through the roof because the gold was no longer coupled to anything real and substantial. Now, since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, the dollar's lost about 95% of its value. But you know what it's still called? A dollar. A dollar. It used to be able to buy 100 pennies worth. Now it can buy 5 pennies worth. But it's still called a dollar. You know what that's called? Deception. Calling something by a name that's not really true. It's not a dollar anymore. It doesn't buy what a dollar used to. It doesn't buy hardly anything. They're going to soon have to change the name of the dollar store to the $100 store or the $10 store or whatever. I imagine the dollar store has a pretty tough gig if you're going to sell everything for $1. Back in the day, it'd be easy to sell things for $1. Nowadays, you go to the dollar store and you get these dinky, tiny little, things in there. It's really hard business to sell something for $1. It'd be like if I handed you a cup of milk whenever you went to the grocery store and said, here's a gallon of milk. You look at that and be like, that's a cup. That's like 1/128th of, no, that's an ounce. How many cups are in it? 16. I forget how many cups are in a gallon. 16 or, no, it's just two cups in a pint, 2 pints in a quart, 4 in a gallon. 16, I think it is. Is that right? Yeah. Anyway, so the point, you get the point. You went to the grocery store and say, I want a gallon of milk, and they hand you a cup. 32. 32, thank you. That's tough math. I mean, you start multiplying numbers like that. I mean, that's hard. So, anyway, so you'd understand when you went to the grocery store and you say, I want a gallon, and they give you a cup. But when you go to the bank and say, I want $1, and they hand you this paper note here that will buy you a half a gallon of gas or something, you don't understand that because you just don't remember that, you used to be able to give a quarter for a gallon of gas. Not anymore. You see how that works? So this is just deceit, just plain and simply deceit. Now here's another example, which is pertinent to current events, and that is with the coronavirus reporting. The death rate of the coronavirus is being inflated by governments who count anyone who dies with coronavirus as having died from coronavirus. Did you know that? So these death rates out there, when somebody dies, if they had coronavirus when they died, I mean, you could literally have a guy that is asymptomatic, that has no symptoms of coronavirus. He walks out in front of a bus and gets plowed over, and the coroner does a test on him and says, oh, he had coronavirus. Another coronavirus death. I kid you not. That's how they're doing it. And you know what? It actually gets worse than that. I just read an article the other day that doctors are being told that when somebody dies, if you even suspect that they might have had coronavirus, you put coronavirus as the reason of death on the death certificate. There are doctors that are speaking out against this, which is good for them. But yeah, if you suspect it might have been. It's a coronavirus death. This is deceitful. Okay, let's get to another area of deception now. Deception is also accomplished by giving gifts or special treatment. You always want to be very careful of the stranger or somebody that you just met that wants to treat you out to an expensive meal. Right? That should put your little antennae up whenever you just meet somebody and they're going to pick up lunch for you at a nice restaurant. You might wonder what's going on there. Look at Proverbs 23 and verses 1 through 3. Now that doesn't happen every day. It doesn't happen very often at all, but I'll give you some examples of things that do happen every day. Proverbs 23, 1 through 3. It says, when thou sittest to eat with a ruler, consider diligently what is before thee, and put a knife to thy throat if thou be a man given to appetite. Be not desirous of his dainties, for they are deceitful meat. Watch out for the guy. You come over to his house and he's giving you all this candy and chocolate, apple pies. That's something you really got to watch. You go to somebody's house and they got a nice hot apple pie waiting for you. Watch out, because you just never know what they may be trying to pull over your head, right? Of course, I'm just kidding. Everybody knows that I got a sweet spot in my heart for apple pie and ice cream. But yeah, watch out for the guy, because that's deceitful meat. He says, hey, eat and drink, but his heart is not with thee. You read later on there in the chapter. Eat and drink, saith he to thee, but his heart is not with thee. The morsel which thou hast eaten shalt thou vomit up, and lose thy sweet words. This happens all the time in business, right? Salesmen, they come around and they want to win your business, and they take you out to these nice, lavish dinners, right? They do it all the time, especially if you work for big corporations. Happens frequently. Or, you know where else it happens? Men taking women out on dates. Take you out on a first date, and they take you to a really nice restaurant to try to impress you, right? Nice fancy restaurant. Watch out for that, because they're trying to convince you to like them. And I've actually known somebody in the past, and she said the reason, what really attracted her to her husband, which this is the dumbest thing in the world, but what attracted her to her husband is whenever he took her out when they were dating, and they'd go to a nice restaurant, and they would get appetizers, and they'd get drinks, and it was just, he'd really lavish her with all this nice food and stuff, and that she really liked that. But yeah, you might want to start looking at character first before, food. But anyway, this happens on dates. But I'd say, you know what, be very careful. The guy that takes you out to a really expensive restaurant on a date, either he doesn't normally go to really expensive restaurants, and he's treating you to something that's not normal, that is not going to continue to happen, or he does go to really expensive restaurants frequently, and he's an idiot and can't manage money. Either way, you probably aren't going to be interested in that guy, because he's either trying to trick you, or else he's showing what a moron he is, one of the two. I'm not saying you can never go to a nice restaurant, but the guy that goes to expensive, fancy restaurants all the time is probably broke. How about lobbyists? Lobbyists do this for politicians frequently. I don't know if you've ever read about how things actually work in Washington or not. It is depressing, not surprising. But I remember when Thomas Massey, I think it was Thomas Massey, he's a Republican from Kentucky in the Congress. One of the very few decent ones, probably one of the only ones, actually, that is a principled guy in the Congress. But anyway, I believe it was he that said whenever he first got to Washington, the lobbyists started coming by, and they explained, here's how things work. And you have to donate to this, like $100,000 to this certain, to be a part of this certain club, in other words. It wasn't a club, but it was something like that. And if you don't do that, then you don't get any appointments to be on any of the committees or any of the chairmanships or anything like that. You're just kind of like a nobody off there back in the corner. It's like $100,000. Where am I going to get that kind of money? Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just talk to this lobbyist and that lobbyist and this, and they'll take care of it. They'll get you all the money that you need. So the lobbyists get you all the money to get in the club, and then you get all the nice perks that go along with it. But you know what happens? You know what happens with the shekels? You know what the shekels are attached to? The shackles. Remember, the shekels are the money, right? You know what shekels are attached to? Shackles. When you take the money, you owe that lobbyist something. He's not giving it to you for no reason. And why do you think then these guys vote for things totally different than they promised you that they would vote for when they were running their campaigns? Why do you think that is? Because the lobbyists get a hold of them and start paying them, and if they want to continue their cushy job, you better vote the way the lobbyists tell you, not the way that people that voted for you tell you to vote. That's why they all get in there and do something totally opposite of what they say they're going to do. And furthermore, whenever they get out of Congress, that's when they really start making the money. Because then you go and you get to be a board member in some multinational corporation or some defense contractor or something like that, some financial institution, and then you get paid all kinds of money as a consultant where you're not actually doing anything. You're being paid back for all the votes that you voted to give these certain industries all kinds of the government largesse. That's how it works. Hate to burst your bubble, destroy your confidence in government, but that's how it actually works. So just be aware. Be aware of people that give you gifts and special treatment because they are trying to deceive you, most likely. You always want to remember that free gift or meal is not free. You also want to be wary of the man or the woman who shows you too much affection. Look at Proverbs 27 and verse 6. Proverbs 27 and verse 6. It says, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful." You see, the good friend will actually wound you, but he'll wound you to help you, right? He'll tell you words that hurt, right? They're like wounds. They really hurt. But that's what a good friend will tell you. He'll tell you when you're wrong, when he sees you going in the wrong direction, and he doesn't want to see you harmed, so he uses hurtful words. But they're not hurtful in a bad sense. They're hurtful just because they hurt, right? But he didn't intend, he's not trying to make you hurt. But the enemy, on the other hand, he tells you what you want to hear, right? He's not going to tell you the words that hurt. He's going to flatter you and puff you up and tell you good things because he wants to stay on your good side. I want to watch out for that. The kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Remember Judas? You remember how he betrayed the Lord Jesus Christ? Luke 22:47 through 48. Luke 22:47 through 48. Remember, the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. And while he yet spake, behold, a multitude, and he that was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them and drew near unto Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said unto him, Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss? What a way to betray the Son of God, with a kiss. You know, he could have just told the priest, hey, when I go up and point at this guy, you'll know it's him. Why did he have to make it a kiss? Because the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. It just made it all the more hurtful to go up to a brother and give him what is allegedly a holy kiss, and it's a kiss of deceit. And then there was a guy named Joab back in the Old Testament, and he used a deceitful kiss to kill a man named Amasa. 2 Samuel 20, 9 through 10. 2 Samuel 20, 9 through 10. It says, And Joab said to Amasa, Art thou in health, my brother? And Joab took Amasa by the beard, and with the right hand to kiss him. Now the previous verse tells us that Joab had girded on a sword underneath his garment that Amasa didn't know about. So Judah goes up to Amasa, and Amasa says, Are you here? Or Judah said to Amasa, Art thou in good health, my brother? Right? The kisses of an enemy are deceitful. My brother. He walks up and says, Oh, brother, are you in good health? How you doing, brother? And he reaches out and he grabs him by the beard, right? He puts his hand on his face. How are you doing? He goes in to kiss him. Right? He took Amasa by the beard with the right hand to kiss him, but Amasa took no heed to the sword that was in Joab's hand, obviously in the left hand, not in the right hand that he was using to embrace him. But Amasa took no heed to the sword that was in Joab's hand, so he smote him therewith in the 5th rib, and shed out his bowels to the ground, and struck him not again, and he died. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, pursued after Sheba, the son of Bichri. Talk about the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Walks up, grabs him by the face to give him a kiss, and stabs him with his left hand. Judy gave me a kiss this morning. I was watching her left hand, though, just to make sure. Deception is also accomplished by using beauty. You see how long I've been going here. Okay, we can do one more here. Yeah, we can finish this. Deception is accomplished by beauty. Look at Proverbs 31 and verse 30. Proverbs 31 and verse 30. Probably familiar with this verse. This is about the virtuous woman. Proverbs 31:30. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain. But a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Favor is deceitful. And it's attached there to beauty. Favor and beauty go together. And I will show you this. Women that are, quote, well-favored can have a powerful influence over men. Look at Genesis 29:17. I think I made reference to this. I didn't give you the verses the other day. I'll let you fill in the dots. Genesis 29, verse 17. Genesis 29:17. This is about Jacob's wives, Leah and Rachel. It says, Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. Now compare that with Song of Solomon 8 and verse 10. I'll show you what well-favored is. Song of Solomon 8 and verse 10. It says, I am a wall, and my breast like towers. Then was I in his eyes as one that found favor. So, women that are well-favored can have a powerful influence over men. The beauty of a woman is like blinders on the eyes of men. It'll make men not see all kinds of things that they should see. How many men have fallen for a beautiful woman that was not a woman of good character, but she was beautiful, and that's all that he could see. All he could see was her beauty. It was just like blinders, like he couldn't see the rest of the stuff. Everybody around him can see it, and everybody around him's like, what are you doing? Like, think about this. Because any married man will tell you, beauty fades, right? I mean, everybody loves to have a beautiful wife, but you know what? Beauty fades. And to have a gorgeous supermodel of a wife, it would not be worth it if she was not a good woman. That would fade away so quickly, and all of a sudden that beautiful woman in your eyes would no longer be beautiful anymore. But you know what? When you find a good, godly woman, and maybe she's not a supermodel, but you know what? She will look more and more attractive to you as you grow in love with her, because she's a good woman and she loves you. So you never want to go after a woman sheerly because of her beauty. Of course, there's always going to be that attraction there, but you never want to pick a woman only because of how she looks, because, as Solomon said, favor is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Women have a powerful ability to deceive men. Look at Job 31 and verse 9. Now, women are not as strong as men physically. On the average woman is nowhere near as strong as the average man. Of course, there are outliers, but typically speaking, women are the weaker vessel, physically weaker. But I'll tell you what, they have much power to influence men. Job 31 and verse 9, Job said, If mine heart hath been deceived by a woman, or if I have laid wait at my neighbor's door. You see, a woman could influence Job, could deceive Job to do something that he shouldn't. We looked at the strange woman last time, and we don't need to go there, but it said there in Proverbs chapter 7, you will remember that it said that she is subtle of heart, there in Proverbs chapter 7. And we remember that subtle means crafty or cunning, treacherously or wickedly cunning, insidious, sly, or wily. Right, so the strange woman is tricky, she's deceitful. And remember how we talked about in the beginning of the sermon that to deceive somebody, I will go ahead and turn to Proverbs 7 just for this point, but to deceive somebody, you make things appear differently than they actually are. Remember, this is what the Proverbs 7 woman did there in verse 14. She says, I have peace offerings with me. This day have I paid my vows. What's she trying to do? Make herself appear religious, appear to be something that she's not. So a lot of these methods of deception, they go together, right? Deceivers don't just use one, right? They use a whole bunch of different varied methods, and sometimes they put them together. And then, of course, they deceive men by their fair speech, and we already talked about that last time there in verse 21. Women also have the power to entice their husbands to do things that they shouldn't do. So this is the strange woman. This is the evil woman that's trying to entice a man into an ungodly relationship. But you know what? You can have wives that can also entice their husbands to do things they shouldn't do. And we're not talking about strange women here. We're just talking about husbands and wives. Let me give you an example of this. Judges 14 and verse 15. Judges 14:15. This happened to a man named Samson. Now, if you remember anything about Samson, you probably remember that he was exceeding strong, right? He was one of the strongest men probably that ever lived, and his strength was in his hair, as you remember. But even the man Samson, who was physically stronger than any other man, that was strong enough to kill, how many was it with the jawbone of an ass? It was hundreds anyway. Heaps upon heaps he had killed with the jawbone of an ass. You know how much energy that would take to kill hundreds of people with the jawbone of an ass? Just to kill hundreds of people, period. I mean, you squeeze a trigger 200 times. I mean, your finger starts to get tired, right? That's about as easy as it gets. Imagine with a sword. swinging a sword, killing 200 people. Wow, I mean, you'd be totally worn out. And then using a jawbone of an ass. I mean, that was a strong guy. And that was probably nothing for a guy like him. But yet a big tough guy like that could have his wife, just through a little manipulation, cause him to do something that he shouldn't have done. Think about that. A lot of times these big tough guys, their wives are the ones that are wearing the pants. You ever notice that? You ever met a big tough guy, macho, driving a big truck, drinking the beer, I hunt, I fish, whatever, big tough guy. His wife wears the pants. She tells him how it's going to be. And he'll even tell you that. Oh, got to go talk to the boss, see what she says. Pathetic. Totally pathetic. Judges 14:15. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they said unto Samson's wife, Entice thy husband, that he may declare unto us the riddle, lest we burn thee and thy father's house with fire. Have ye called us to take that we have? Is it not so? Remember, Samson made this riddle, and he told them that if, I forget the exact deal, but 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments, if they could figure out the riddle in 7 days, they would give him all that stuff, and or he would give it to them, and if they couldn't figure out the riddle, then they'd give it to him. So anyway, that was the deal. And they can't figure out the riddle. So they go to his wife, and then they threaten her. Now, think about this. You're married to Samson. Samson could wipe these dudes out easily. He could just, pick them up and just twist their heads off. Right? Why would you even worry about these guys? But she does what they say and entices her husband. Look at chapter 16 and verse 5. Judges 16 and verse 5. And the lords of the Philistines came up unto her, and said unto her, Entice him, and see wherein his great strength lieth, and by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and we will give thee every one of us 1,100 pieces of silver. What kind of a wife is going to turn in your husband to get him to be bound and afflicted by some reprobates to get money? This is not a good woman. You see, Samson he was not a man of good character in a lot of ways. He could not control his passions. He said to his parents, he saw this woman that he liked. I forget what nation she was from. Anyway, it escapes me right now. And he said, Get her for me to wife, for she pleaseth me. I want her. I like the looks of her. Get her for me. I'm not sure if that was this one or a different one. I can't remember now. But anyway, so these guys, they are getting the wife to entice the husband to do something that he should not do. Now, oftentimes, women will get what they want. Wives will get what they want from their husbands by crying. In other words, they're acting like babies. That's what babies do. When babies want something, they cry. Well, sometimes when wives want something, they cry too. Judges 14:16 through 17. And I'm not just making this up. Here, I got Bible for you. Judges 14:16 through 17. And this is when a man has to be strong. If you're right, I don't care if your wife is crying. Let her cry. Judges 14:16 through 17. And Samson's wife wept before him and said, Thou dost but hate me and lovest me not. Thou hast put forth a riddle unto the children of my people, and hast not told it me. And he said unto her, Behold, I have not told it my father nor my mother, and shall I tell it thee? So she cries, Tell me the riddle. It's hard to say no to tears, but a good man will say no to tears if she's wrong. So husbands, don't give in to your wife's crying when she wants to do something wrong, or when she's trying to convince you to do something wrong. Say no to the tears. Pay no attention to them if she's wrong. Wives will also entice their husbands to do wrong things by questioning their love for them. You see what she did there? In this passage, we already read it. She says, Thou dost but hate me and lovest me not. You don't love me. If you loved me, you'd tell me. How many wives have done that? I'll bet you plenty of them. If you loved me, you'd buy me this. If you loved me, you'd do this. If you loved me, right? Why don't you love me? You know what that's called? Manipulation. Manipulation. Look at Judges 16, 15 through 17. And she said unto him, How canst thou say, I love thee, when thine heart is not with me? Oh, I thought you loved me. Thou hast mocked me these 3 times, and hast not told me wherein thy great strength lieth. Remember, he kept lying to her. She kept, Tell me where your strength lies. Oh, if you do this to me, I'll have no strength. And then she goes and snitches on him, and they do that to him. Oh, if you bind me with cords, I have no power. And he just rips right through him. He just keeps giving her a line. Oh, if you loved me, you'd tell me. Verse 16, it came to pass, when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him so that his soul was vexed unto death. He just couldn't take it anymore. This nagging woman is driving me crazy. That he told her all his heart and said unto her, There hath not come a razor upon mine head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. And guess what his loving wife did? Went and told the Philistines, and they went and shaved his head. He lost all of his strength, and they plucked his eyeballs out and took him off to be a slave and to be basically to make fun of him, to make sport. Took him out there and paraded him around like he was in a circus. It should have been enough. After the first 2 times, when she says, If you love me, just tell me, and then he tells her and she snitches on him, hello, what's wrong with you? But this just goes to show you, even a strong man has his limit, and when he gets nagged enough, he just says, fine, do whatever you want. But you don't want to go there. So man, the next time you're tempted to go along with your wife's unbiblical ideas, just remember Adam and Eve. Remember Eve, she took of the tree of the fruit, she saw it was good, pleasant to the eyes, good to be desired for food, and to be desired to make one wise. She took of the fruit and did eat, and gave to her husband also, and he did eat. We read in Romans 5 and verse 12 that by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, so that death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. Just remember that whenever you take your wife's ungodly advice. But, I don't want to stop there. If your wife is right, listen to her, and don't be a fool. Right? If she's right, listen to her. And I'll give you an example of that. Genesis 21, 9 through 12. Basically, what I'm telling you is this is not some tirade against women or against anybody. This is just telling you, just do what's right. And if somebody tries to convince you to do something that's not right, don't do it. And if they try to tell you to do something right, do it. Right? It's just that simple. Just do what's right. And what's right? What's in the Bible. Do what's biblical. Genesis 21, 9 through 12. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham mocking. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. See, Abraham didn't want to hear what Sarah had to say, but Sarah in this case was right. Now she was wrong earlier when she said, hey, take Hagar, my handmaid, and have a son through her. He shouldn't have listened to Sarah in that case, but he did. But now when Sarah is right, he doesn't want to listen to her. See, he listened to her when she was wrong, but he doesn't want to listen to her when she's right. This is grievous. But you know what God said? God said, well, Abraham, you're the head. You just do whatever you want. Don't worry about what that woman says. That's not what God said. And God said unto Abraham, Let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad and because of thy bondwoman. In all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called. You know what God said? Listen to your wife. In that case, she was right, and God said listen to her. So if she's right, listen to her. If she's wrong, don't listen to her. It's just that simple. All right, I think that's probably going to be enough. I'm sure I've been going on here for close to an hour. Yeah, so we're right at an hour, so we're gonna call it quits right there, and then we'll finish up this next section next time when we talk about how deception is accomplished by disguising one's true appearance. And then we're also going to get into how deceivers use false philosophy, and this will be interesting, to deceive people as well.